When Katherine Walker moved into Robbins Reef Light, she was very displeased. The lighthouse was in New York Harbor, isolated from the mainland, and most egregiously left no space to plant a garden. This probably wasn't what she had in mind when beginning a new life in America, but over time, she slowly unpacked her bags and settled in for the long haul. I'm Carolina, and welcome to the Lighthouse Narrative. I'm covering the history of Robbins Reef Light and its most famous lighthouse keeper, Katherine Walker. New York Harbor is one of the busiest harbors in the world. Its shipping traffic includes commuter ferries, cruise ships, container ships, tugboats, tankers, and barges. It serves as an international shipping center for the ports of New York and New Jersey. The harbor is split into the lower and upper New York bays. The upper bay is surrounded by New Jersey and the New York City boroughs of Staten Island, Brooklyn, and Manhattan. On its southwestern side is the Quai Von Cole, a channel connecting to Newark Bay. Near its entrance, at the northern tip of Staten Island, is a submerged reef that is dangerous to ships. This is Robbins Reef, originally named Robbins Rift by early Dutch settlers, known for being a popular spot for seals to rest. To avoid ships crashing into the reef, Congress approved $50,000 to build a lighthouse on top of it on March 3, 1837. The construction of an octagonal lighthouse was completed in 1838. It was a multi-leveled granite tower that also functioned as a keeper's dwelling, equipped with a rowboat and a fog bell. Its first lighthouse keeper was Isaac Johnson, who activated the tower in 1839, its beacon a set of lamps and reflectors. In 1855, these were replaced by a fourth-order Fresnel lens. Later on, in March of 1883, the lighthouse was dismantled to make way for a better structure. The lightship LV-25, which you can think of as a floating lighthouse, temporarily marked the reef as a new spark plug lighthouse was constructed. Spark plugs are offshore lighthouses built as cast iron towers on concrete or caisson foundations. Like its predecessor, this new version of Robbins Reef was also a keeper's dwelling, containing a kitchen, sitting room, and bedrooms with wooden floors and brick walls. The lighthouse also had a watch room and a lantern room, where the keeper performed most of their tasks. As for the exterior, the top half of the tower was painted white and the bottom half painted brown to give it a distinctive marking mariners could identify during the day. A rowboat and fog bell were also present, although the fog bell was a backup in case the new foghorn malfunctioned. 16 keepers served at the lighthouse from 1839 to 1885, before Katherine Walker made an appearance. Katherine's journey began in a different part of the world before she arrived at Robbins Reef. She was born in Rumbach, Germany in 1848 as Catherine Gortler. She married Jacob Card, and in 1875 they had a son together named Jacob Jr. Tragically, her husband passed away only a year after their son was born. And desiring a new life, in 1882, Katherine immigrated to America with her son and settled in Sandy Hook, New Jersey, where she became a cook at the officers' quarters at Fort Hancock. It was there that she met her future husband, Captain John Walker. John was a Swedish immigrant, a retired sea captain, and an assistant lighthouse keeper at Sandy Hook East Beacon. Sandy Hook had 3 lighthouses at the time: the main light, Sandy Hook, and its supportive lights, East and West Beacons, also known as North and South Beacons. By the late 1940s, both beacon lights had been removed. As John took his meals at the officers' quarters, he developed a friendship with Katherine. At some point, he graciously offered to give her English lessons for free, and from there, a romance blossomed between them. They married in 1884 and Katherine and her son moved in with John in a house near Sandy Hook Light. For Katherine, married life turned out to be an agreeable arrangement. She took great care of a vegetable and flower garden. She also engaged in conversation with curious visitors and locals. John even taught her how to manage the lighthouse, and she eventually became his dutiful assistant. However, this picturesque life was cut short when the U.S. Lighthouse Service promoted John to Principal Lighthouse Keeper and transferred him to Robbins Reef Light in 1885. In Katherine's view, this was a downgrade. To live in a massive hulking piece of metal offshore with no contact with anyone and no place to grow anything. On remembering this turning point in her life, Katherine once mentioned to a visitor of Robbins Reef, quote, "When I first came to Robbins Reef, the sight of the water, whichever way I looked, made me lonesome. I refused to unpack my trunks at first, but gradually, a little at a time, I unpacked. After a while, they were all unpacked, and I stayed on." End quote. Katherine had no choice but to adapt to her new living situation, continuing on as her husband's lighthouse assistant. As the family settled in, she gave birth to her second child, Mary, in 1886. Later on, in October of that year, the family watched the opening of the Statue of Liberty from the lighthouse through binoculars. During those early years at Robbins Reef, lighthouse work kept the parents busy, while toys kept the children happily occupied. During their downtime, they read books from a traveling library, a case of books that circulated between different lighthouses every few months. But just as Katherine's future was brightening, her life would change once again. In 1890, John was sick. Medical intervention was needed when he got worse. Katherine initiated a distress signal to call for aid, an upside-down American flag just outside the lighthouse. Men from the lighthouse depot in Staten Island heeded the call. As John was lowered into a small boat to be taken to the hospital, his parting words to his wife were, "Mind the light, Kate." She couldn't go with him, as she had to make sure the light remained on to keep ships in the harbor safe. Upon reaching the Smith Infirmary in Tompkinsville, Staten Island, John was treated for ammonia. After a few days, Kate spotted an oarsman rowing to the lighthouse. When she saw that he was alone, she knew that John succumbed to his illness. Now twice widowed, with 2 children to care for, Katherine wouldn't let this tragedy be her end. At 4'10" tall, she was made of sturdier stuff. She was determined to honor her husband's final wish. The U.S. Lighthouse Service demanded Katherine vacate Robbins Reef shortly after John died, in which she solidly stood her ground and said no. She waited for a new keeper to take her husband's place, even though she wanted to be the main keeper herself. 2 men were offered the position, but neither accepted, so she continued tending to the light on a salary of $350 a year. It wasn't until June 28, 1894, after years of vacancy, she was appointed acting principal keeper. Her position was made permanent in 1895, her salary increasing to $600 a year. With this official appointment, she was required to wear a white apron, as a sort of uniform, while tending to the light. Under Katherine's care, the lighthouse was a comfortable home. On its white brick walls hung art and photographs of family. Plants and flowers were placed in front of windows draped in curtains, and floors laden with rugs bore the weight of wooden carved furniture. Kerosene lamps were the primary sources of light. These comforts were paired with music drifting from Katherine's gramophone, opera, one of her favorite musical genres. In the kitchen was Katherine's rocking chair, which sat beside a coal stove, the sole heating source in the tower. There was no means to refrigerate fresh food, like milk and meat, which wasn't a problem in the winter months. During the summer, as noted by Lucille Walker Payne, Katherine's granddaughter, condensed milk was used instead. When the weather was hot, Katherine used the summer kitchen in the cellar for cooking to keep the main living areas cool. Back in the day, it was typical to have this type of kitchen built on a lower level, primarily used, as its name suggests, in the summertime. As cozy as Katherine's home was, she did leave the lighthouse on occasion to visit friends, pick up mail, or row her children to school in Staten Island, if the weather allowed. If the weather soured, her children stayed with friends on shore until she could retrieve them. She also picked up supplies, which was supplemented by the lighthouse service's yearly drop-off of coal and barrels of oil for the light. Katherine was never one to sit idle, always content to keep busy. In her sitting room, she recorded the weather, vessel activity, and supply consumption in a logbook, as required of her as a lighthouse keeper. When fog was incoming, she powered the engine in the cellar to activate the foghorn. At sunset, the guns fired from Fort Jay and Governor's Island, which she used as her signal to light the tower's lantern. During her overnight watch, she refilled the oil reservoir for the lantern every 3 hours. She also had the additional duty of wiping frost off the lantern room's windows in the winter, as the glass had to remain clear for the light to show properly. She polished the lens's brass framework every day and cleaned the lens every month. With this busy schedule, she didn't have a chance to visit her husband's grave. On this particular topic, she mentioned, quote, "Every morning when the sun comes up, I stand at the porthole and look towards his grave. Sometimes the hills are brown, sometimes they are green, sometimes they are white with snow, but they always bring a message from him, something I heard him say oftener than anything else. Just 3 words, mind the light." End quote. When Katherine tended to the light on Christmas, she typically sent John and Mary ashore to spend time with relatives and friends so they could enjoy the holiday. But as they grew older, work and education took priority. Mary attended school on Staten Island, but lived with Katherine for most of her life as her faithful companion. Growing up, she kept a pet bird in a cage that she'd sometimes bring out on the promenade deck when the weather was warm. As for Jacob, he was appointed assistant lighthouse keeper in 1896. After marrying Loretta Wright a year later, they moved in with Katherine to raise a family. The couple had 5 children together: Emma May, Katherine, Alberta, Lucille, and Jacob Jr. The 3 oldest daughters lived at the lighthouse, while the 2 youngest were born later when the couple moved to an apartment in Staten Island so their children could attend school. Despite this necessary move, the family's love for the lighthouse was unwavering, so they often visited on weekends, holidays, and in the summer. For Katherine, she enjoyed her solitude, but was always ready to host guests when they came to visit. Every year, friends and family were invited to her summer celebration. Some of her grandchildren even learned how to swim at the lighthouse. But not all experiences were showered in warmth, laughter, and love. In November of 1905, 8-year-old Emma May, one of Jacob and Loretta's daughters, passed away at the lighthouse. She fell down the metal stairwell and didn't recover from her injuries. Speculation of her death soon followed when an anonymous letter was sent to the Secretary of Commerce declaring her death the result of a contagious disease. The doctor attending to Emma May disagreed, stating she only had trouble with her kidneys, which contributed to her failed recovery. Another death followed in 1913, when Loretta was diagnosed with cancer. During this difficult time, Mary moved in with her brother to take care of Katherine and Alberta on Staten Island, while Lucille and Jacob Jr. were sent to live with their grandmother at the lighthouse. Despite the additional help, Loretta passed away at 38 years old on Thanksgiving Day. Lucille and Jacob Jr. returned to live with their father when they were of school age. Katherine was credited for saving 50 lives during her career. On one blistering wintry day, Katherine rescued 5 men from a schooner that ran aground. Before the group returned to the lighthouse, the captain was frantic for his dog, Scotty. Fortunately, Katherine spotted the poor thing struggling in the water and was able to capture him with one of her oars. Once Scotty was on board, it took her 2 hours to row back to the lighthouse against the cold wind. She struggled up the ladder and brought Scotty into the lighthouse for safety, but he was already suffering from hypothermia. She was able to nurse him back to health by giving him some coffee that was kept warm on the stove, a warm blanket, and attentive care. Most of her other rescues were extracting fishermen from the reef, their boats having crashed into it during foul weather. According to Katherine, it seemed like these men didn't take their close encounters with death seriously, even laughing it off. She speculated, quote, "I've never made up my mind whether they are courageous or stupid. Maybe they don't know how near they have come to their maker. Or perhaps they know and are not afraid. But I think that in the adventure, they haven't realized how near their souls have been to taking flight from the body." End quote. Katherine was a well-versed rower, trained for the harsh winters New York Harbor offered. But that didn't mean she was safe from the clutches of death herself. On one Christmas day, Katherine was fighting against a violent storm to secure her boat. The chain holding it was loose, and if it wasn't fixed, she risked losing her only way to leave the lighthouse. The strong winds almost knocked her off the icy promenade deck, and the chain struck her in the eye. But she was successful in securing her boat. On another occasion, she struggled to row from Staten Island to the lighthouse, which should have been a mile-long journey. The force of the wind and snow trapped her in the harbor for 3 hours before a ferry came to her rescue and towed her boat to the lighthouse. When she finally made it inside, she was covered in ice from the spray of the water. After living in the lighthouse for over 30 years, Katherine's personal and work life blended seamlessly together. She enjoyed her own company and that of her children and grandchildren. Vessels passing by were distant neighbors, and the hour before dawn was her period of self-reflection, as the harbor was quiet. Being at the lighthouse was a blessed existence where she preferred to stay. When she had to leave for business in Manhattan, though, she dreaded it, as she was fearful of city life, loud noises, and in particular, cars. But she wouldn't have to worry about these business trips anymore, as in 1919, she reluctantly moved out of Robbins Reef. A new government regulation mandated that lighthouse personnel retire at 70 years old. The lighthouse service sent her a letter dated January 8th that same year, officially retiring her at age 71. Katherine settled into a small cottage with a garden on Staten Island. Jacob took over her role as principal keeper for the next 2 years. In her retirement, she lived with Mary and adopted a dog, collecting $471.50 as her annual pension. At home, she was interviewed by occasional news reporters who published articles recounting her life at Robbins Reef. She spent much of her time with family and sometimes stood at the waterfront to check if the lighthouse was functioning properly. It's even reported she may have traveled a few times to Robbins Reef to visit the lighthouse keeper on duty. After living a life of solitude, hard work born out of love and dedication, she passed away at 83 years old on February 5th, 1931. She was buried at the Ocean View Cemetery in Staten Island. No lighthouse keeper at Robbins Reef matched Katherine's notoriety. She was very well known to mariners in the harbor, who often referred to Robbins Reef as Kate's Light. Many articles were written about her in the Brooklyn Daily Eagle, the New York Times, and the New York Evening Post. In her honor, the U.S. Coast Guard named one of their new tenders, a type of ship, the Katherine Walker, which launched on September 14, 1996. The tender is in charge of maintaining over 300 navigational aids in New York Harbor, New Jersey, and the Long Island Sound. A children's book titled Kate's Light was published in 2021. Written by Elizabeth Spires and illustrated by Emily Arnold McCulley. The book is a retelling of Kate's life at Robbins Reef. Years after her death, civilian lighthouse keepers were replaced by Coast Guard personnel until 1967, when the lighthouse was officially automated and no longer needed to be manned. But without a human touch, the lighthouse fell into disrepair. It remained close to abandoned for over 40 years until 2009, when the Noble Maritime Collection, a museum and study center, submitted a proposal to obtain rights to the lighthouse. In 2011, they succeeded and have since been the stewards of Robbins Reef, slowly working to restore the lighthouse to its former glory. For now, they have a Robbins Reef light exhibit at their museum in Staten Island, displaying a timeline of events at the lighthouse, a gallery of lighthouse-inspired artwork, and a smaller exhibit of Katherine's sitting room from Robbins Reef. The lighthouse still serves as an active aid to navigation, flashing a green light every 6 seconds. On a parting note, the New York Evening Post wrote Katherine's obituary in 1931. Quote, "A great city's waterfront is rich in romance. There are queenly liners, the grim battlecraft, the countless carriers of commerce that pass in endless procession. And amid all this, and in the sight of the city of towers and the torch of liberty, lived this sturdy little woman, proud of her work and content in it, keeping her lamp alight and her windows clean, so that New York Harbor might be safe for ships that pass in the night." End quote. I want to give a special shout out to the Noble Maritime Collection for providing photos of Katherine Walker. Thank you for tuning in to the history of Robbins Reef. Join me in the next video as we continue to explore lighthouse history and the stories of its keepers. Until then, happy lighthouse hunting.